Deep beneath the mountains, a young dwarf's discovery would change everything. Thrain Stonehand was just a prospector, searching a collapsed mine shaft, when his pick struck not ore, but a smooth, carved surface. He wiped away the dust to reveal a cryptic runestone, its surface etched with a forgotten map. It pointed to a legendary stronghold, a realm deeper than any known to dwarf kind, a place called Khazad-dûm. His heart raced. This map could restore his clan's lost honor, but the ancient runes also carried a grave warning. They spoke of eternal guardians and a curse upon any who dared to disturb the depths. The weight of the stone in his hand felt like both a key to glory and a chain binding him to a perilous path, a journey from which there may be no return. By the end of this tale, you will uncover the profound secrets of these hidden dwarf realms and the ancient powers that guard them. What ancient curse would you risk for the chance to redeem your people's name? I would love to know where you are listening from right now and what the local time is for you as we begin this journey together. Thrain did not hesitate. He ran through torchlit tunnels, the heavy runestone clutched against his chest, until he found Elder Balin in the Great Archive. Balin's initial excitement at seeing the map quickly soured into deep concern as his finger traced the warning rune. "You must not go, Thrain," he urged, his voice a low rumble. Some depths were sealed for a reason, but Thrain's conviction was a fire that could not be banked. This was their clan's chance, their only chance, to reclaim a glory stolen by time and misfortune. He argued with a passion that finally and reluctantly wore the old dwarf down. Balin agreed to gather a small, trusted team, sworn to secrecy. Yet in a settlement carved from stone, whispers travel like water through cracks. News of the discovery seeped out, reaching the ears of rival clans who watched with greedy eyes, and other, darker things that listened from the deep shadows. The descent was immediate. At the clan council, Thrain faced a wall of grim faces and shaking heads. Elders who remembered old tragedies spoke of slumbering evils and the folly of dwarven ambition. "You are a prospector, not a pathfinder," one chided. "You would lead us to ruin for a dream." Thrain stood his ground, his voice steady despite the doubt crushing down on him. He spoke not of treasure, but of legacy. He spoke of a name forgotten, a home lost, and the right to sing their songs in halls that were theirs by right. To silence the final critic, he made a vow that stunned the chamber into silence. He would lead the expedition himself. His name, his future, his very honor were now bound to the success of this quest. The mission was no longer a hopeful journey. It became a desperate race. Rival treasure seekers were already preparing their own parties, and every moment of delay risked losing the path to the runestone. The team's preparations were frantic, a blur of checking ropes, sharpening axes, and packing minimal supplies for a delve into the absolute unknown. The threat was no longer just from rivals or the judgment of elders, but from the mountain itself, from crumbling passages and traps left by forgotten minds. As the final pack was secured and Thrain stood before the sealed gate that marked the descent into the older, deeper darkness, the very stone beneath their feet groaned. A long, deep tremor shook the hall, sending dust drifting down from the ceiling. The depths were not sleeping, they were waiting. That deep, groaning tremor was a final warning they could not ignore. Thrain and Balin moved with a new urgency, their search for companions not for camaraderie, but for sheer survival. They found Kara first, a stoic warrior whose axe was as sharp as her gaze. She listened to Thrain's plan in silence, her eyes fixed on the runestone. "You have a miner's luck," she finally said, her voice like grinding stone. "But luck is a poor shield against what guards the deep places." Her agreement was a practical one. She had seen clans fall to internal strife and external threats, and if this venture held any hope, it needed a blade that would not falter. Next came Dvalin, an engineer whose fingers could sense the slightest shift in a tunnel's support. He was less concerned with curses and more with collapse. He ran a hand over the map, muttering calculations about weight distribution and the decay of ancient stonework. "We are not just walking into the dark," he warned. "We are walking into a tomb that may be eager to seal itself shut." The final member was Fror, a lore keeper whose memory was a library of forgotten ballads and lineage. He could read the subtext in the runes, the history between the carved lines. He did not question the danger, only the meaning. "Every mark on this stone is a choice our ancestors made," he murmured. "We must hope they chose wisely for us." Thrown together, the team was a collection of sharp edges. Around the planning table, Kara's skepticism was a constant chill. "You have never led anyone but a mule, Thrain," she stated bluntly. "Your conviction is a flame, but it will gutter out at the first true breath of wind." Dvalin fretted over every detail, from the tensile strength of their ropes to the precise mixture of their lamp oil. What good is a warrior's courage if the ceiling gives way? He would argue, his blueprints spread across the stone floor. The friction was palpable, a clash of stone on stone. Thrain knew words would not unite them. Only action could. He took the runestone and spread his own, simpler maps beside it. Charts he had drawn from a lifetime of reading the mountain's veins and fractures. "My hands may not be stained with ink like Fror's, or know the grip of a great axe like Kara's," he told them, his voice low and steady, "but I can feel the truth of the stone. I know where it wants to hold firm and where it wants to fall. This path is not just lines on a rock. It is a story, and I will read it." Their supplies were packed with grim efficiency. The bundles were light, a deliberate choice that carried its own heavy message. There would be no long retreat, no resupply. Once they passed the great sealed gate, at the edge of the known delves, they were committed. The path would either lead them to glory, or it would become their grave. On the morning of their departure, a thin, cold light filtered into the hall. The elders gave their blessings, their voices echoing with a formality that felt more like a farewell. Balin clasped Thrain's forearm, his old eyes filled with a terrible mix of pride and fear. With final nods that were heavier than any pack, the 5 dwarves turned from the warm, familiar glow of their home. They passed through the massive, rune-carved gate, and it boomed shut behind them, the sound final as a tomb door closing. Their lanterns flickered to life, not as a welcoming beacon, but as a tiny, defiant challenge to the immense, descending dark that swallowed them whole. The passage ahead was not a tunnel but a throat, carved with runes that seemed to swallow the light from their lanterns. This was the sealed gate of Zudden, Aiken, a barrier of fused stone and black iron that had not been opened in 1,000 years. It was not a door meant for keys, but for minds. Dwalen stepped forward, his breath clouding in the sudden chill. He ran his hands over the intricate mechanism, a puzzle of interlocking stone rings and counterweights, each marked with a shifting, glowing rune. The silence was so profound they could hear the faint grind of stone deep within the wall as he worked. Kara stood guard, her axe held ready, while Fror whispered the meanings of the runes as they rotated. Hope is a shifting stone, he murmured. Balance is the key. Dwalen's fingers, sensitive as a spider's legs, traced the hidden seams. He calculated the weight of each ring, the pull of counterweights they could not see. It was a song of pressure and equilibrium, and he was listening for the final, perfect note. With a final, deliberate turn of a central rune, he found it. A deep, resonant click echoed through the hall, and the great gate groaned inward, its movement shaking dust from the ceiling. They had done it, but their triumph lasted only a heartbeat. The ancient mechanism, stressed by centuries of stillness, gave way. A thunderous crack sounded from above, and a portion of the tunnel behind them collapsed in a roar of stone and dust. The sound was deafening, a final verdict. When the dust settled, the way back was a solid wall of broken rock. Their retreat was gone. Panic flickered in the dim light. "We are trapped," Dwalen stated, his voice flat with horror as he assessed the damage. One of their supply packs was buried, and a water skin had been crushed. "We must try to clear it," Kara argued, her warrior's mind seeking any exit. "It could take days, and our air is finite." Thrain's voice cut through the fear, calm and absolute. He stood before the now open gate, looking into the darkness beyond. "We do not look back," he said. "The mountain has taken our retreat to remind us that our only path is forward. Our only choice is the one we already made." His words were a door closing in their minds. They gathered their remaining, lighter gear, the loss of supplies a tangible weight. The sealed gate of Zudden Aiken was no longer a barrier, but a tomb door at their backs, and the silence that followed the collapse was a new kind of enemy. Then, from the tunnels ahead, they heard it, not an echo of their own movements, but a faint, skittering whisper, a sound like dry leaves scraping over stone. The air grew cold and unnaturally still, as if the very darkness was holding its breath. Thrain lifted his lantern, and its flickering light caught a glimmer on the wall, a soft, silver radiance that seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. It was the first vein of Mithril, a thread of captured starlight running through the heart of the mountain, untouched for ages. The narrow ledge was a mere crack in the wall of a void, so vast their lantern light could not find the other side. A cold, upward draft carried the scent of deep water and age. They moved in a tense, single file, ropes securing them to pittons Dwalen hammered into the stone. Every footstep was a calculated risk, every scrape of boot leather echoing into the abyss. Fror paused, his fingers tracing shapes in the rock face. "These are not just decorative," he whispered, his voice swallowed by the immensity. "They are a history." The carvings told of the Stronghold's builders, a clan of unparalleled artisans who delved too deep in search of something they called the Heartstone. And then the story simply stopped. The final panel showed empty halls and abandoned forges, a civilization not destroyed, but vanished. Kara's section of the ledge gave way without a sound. One moment, she was a solid silhouette against the dark. The next she was falling. Thrain's hand shot out, his miner's grip locking around her wrist with a force that jarred his entire frame. For a suspended second, she dangled over the endless drop, her eyes wide not with fear, but with shock. He hauled her back onto the ledge, his breath coming in ragged gasps. She nodded once, a sharp, wordless acknowledgement. The simple trust that had been missing was now forged in the grip that had saved her life. The psychological weight of the dark began to press in. Dwalen kept glancing over his shoulder, his knuckles white on his rope. "The silence is wrong," he muttered, his voice tight. "It is too complete. It feels like a held breath." "I feel eyes on us." His fear was a contagion, feeding the vertigo that threatened to unbalance them all. Thrain knew they could not linger on this exposed path, a perfect spot for an ambush from some unseen watcher. He pointed ahead, to where two great stalactites and stalagmites had fused over millennia into a fragile-looking natural arch, a stone bridge spanning the chasm. "It is a risk," he admitted, his voice cutting through their doubts, "but the risk of staying on this ledge is greater." We crossed the bridge. As they approached the arch, a new wonder and a new terror revealed itself. The walls of the chasm below began to glow with a faint, pulsating light. Vast fields of fungi, in hues of sickly green and ethereal blue, reacted to their presence, their luminescence brightening as the dwarves passed. It was a beautiful, haunting sight. The very ecosystem was aware of them, a living map charting their progress for anyone or anything that could read its cold, fungal light. Halfway across the slender stone bridge, a new sound joined the whisper of the abyss. A low, rhythmic pounding began to resonate up through the soles of their boots, a deep and percussive vibration that thrummed in their bones. It was not the random groan of shifting stone. This was a beat, deliberate and powerful, growing steadily louder with each passing moment. The rhythmic pounding from the depths was a drumbeat urging them forward, away from the treacherous bridge and into a new kind of awe. The tunnel opened abruptly, and the 5 dwarves stood in stunned silence at the edge of a cavern, so immense its ceiling was lost in a glittering haze. This was no ordinary cave. It was a forest of crystals, each spire larger than an ancient tree, growing from the floor and hanging from the unseen heights. A soft, internal light pulsed within the gemstone pillars, casting shifting rainbows across the walls. The air itself hummed with a faint, musical energy, and the slightest whisper echoed into a chorus. Fror breathed a name that was little more than a legend, the crystal caverns of Nalandoom. He warned them that the crystals were not just beautiful, they were resonant, amplifying the smallest sound into a potentially shattering force. To cross, they would have to move with the silence of ghosts. Every footfall became a deliberate, agonizingly slow placement. They communicated with nothing more than hand signals and the meeting of their eyes. The crushing weight of potential noise was a pressure greater than the mountain above them. It was Dwalen, his mind still racing with calculations from the bridge, who made the first mistake. Distracted by a complex lattice of crystal above them, he shifted his weight, and his iron-shod boot scuffed against a small, loose shard on the floor. The sound was tiny, a single, clear chime like a bell. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the chime was caught and amplified, racing up the nearest crystal pillar. The gentle hum in the air sharpened into a painful whine. A web of cracks shot up the pillar with a sound like breaking ice, and a large section of it exploded outward in a shower of razor-sharp shards. Kara, who was passing closest to it, had only a split second to react. She threw herself forward, but a rain of crystal fragments pelted her back and legs, and a large, spear-like shard slammed into the ground where her head had been a moment before. She was pinned, not by the crystal, but by the need for absolute stillness. Her body tensed against the ringing pain. The cavern continued to vibrate, the dying resonance a threat of total collapse. They were trapped, halfway across a sonic minefield. Thrain looked from the terrified face of Dwalin to the prone form of Kara, his own heart hammering a rhythm that felt loud enough to bring the whole ceiling down. He remembered an old miner's tale, a story of using a specific, low-frequency hum to calm unstable rock. It was a desperate gamble. He signaled to the others, pointing to his throat, then making a slow, steady motion with his hand. He took a deep, controlled breath and began to hum, not a melody, but a single, deep, foundational note. It was the note of the mountain's core, a sound of stability and weight. Balin understood first, adding his own voice to the chord, followed by Fror. Dwalin, his hands shaking, joined last. Their four voices wove together into a low, resonant drone that spread through the cavern. The sharp, dangerous vibrations from the shattered crystal began to soften, absorbed and soothed by the deliberate chant. The angry whine faded, replaced by a harmonious, steady thrum. It was working. Moving with painstaking slowness, they helped Kara to her feet. She was cut and bruised, but able to walk. Guided by their stabilizing chant, the group moved as one entity through the glittering forest, their voices a shield against the deadly acoustics. The crossing was a test of pure will, a harmony of dwarf and stone that felt less like a trick of sound and more like a negotiation with something ancient and aware. The crystals seemed to listen, their internal light pulsing in time with their chant. On the far side, their voices fell silent. The cavern behind them returned to its serene, humming silence, but the experience had changed them. Thrain had not just found a path, he had communed with the mountain's deep magic. His leadership was no longer born of desperation, but of understanding. Set into the cavern wall was a grand, carved stairway, its steps worn into smooth, shallow bowls by the passage of countless feet over untold ages. It spiraled down into a darkness that their lanterns could not penetrate, a descent that promised answers far older than any runestone. The worn stairway ended at the edge of an abyss, a chasm so deep and dark it felt like the end of the world. Spanning it was a bridge that defied reason, a structure woven from strands of petrified shadow and threads of solid mist. It looked insubstantial, a phantom path that shimmered and wavered before their eyes. Fror held up a hand, his face pale in the gloom. He whispered the name his lore had given this place, the Bridge of Shadows. "It does not test your weight," he said, his voice hushed with reverence. "It tests your worth. It solidifies only for a heart that is resolute. To hesitate is to fall." The bridge flickered ominously, as if listening. Thrain knew this was a test he had to face first. He did not look down into the consuming darkness. He fixed his mind on a single, burning image, the future glory of his clan restored, their songs echoing in reclaimed halls. He stepped onto the seeming void, His boot met solid, unyielding stone. With each confident step, the bridge crystallized beneath him, a path of dark, gleaming rock, forming just ahead of his feet and vanishing the moment he passed. He reached the far side and turned, a silent challenge to his companions. Balin went next, his steps slow but certain, his faith in Thrain's vision creating a firm path. Then it was Dvalin's turn. The engineer, a dwarf who trusted only calculations and proven stresses, looked at the impossible bridge, and his certainty fractured. He thought of the collapsed tunnel, of his own miscalculation in the crystal caverns. As he placed a tentative foot on the first span, the bridge flickered violently. A section beneath him dissolved into smoke, and he lurched forward with a cry, saved only by a desperate leap onto the still solid part ahead. His doubt had almost been his end. Heart pounding, he forced his mind away from failure and toward the trust he had in his companions, and the bridge grudgingly solidified, allowing him to stumble across. Kara was the last. She stepped onto the bridge with her usual warrior's confidence, but halfway across, the mists around her coalesced into a vision. She saw not the chasm, but a battle from her past, a moment of hesitation that had cost a comrade his life. The memory was a physical blow. The bridge beneath her feet wavered, its form turning to treacherous smoke. She could feel the pull of the abyss, but instead of succumbing to the guilt, she embraced it. She accepted the weight of that failure, not as a chain to bind her, but as a lesson that forged her into the protector she was now. Her resolve hardened into a tangible force. The bridge snapped into absolute solidity, a wide, strong road of black diamond that did not fade. She walked the rest of the way with her head held high, her inner demons silenced. On the other side, a new, profound unity settled over the team. They had each faced a private trial and emerged stronger, but their relief was short-lived. Before them stretched a vast hall, so large their lamplight could not reach its distant ceiling. Lining the walls were towering statues of ancient dwarf lords, each carved with such lifelike detail, they seemed ready to speak. Their beards were intricate networks of stone braids, their eyes polished gems that caught the feeble light, and as the 5 dwarves took their first steps into the silent gallery, a slow, grinding sound echoed through the hall. One by one, the stone heads of the statues began to turn, their gemstone eyes fixing an unblinking, judging gaze upon the intruders. The stone heads turned with the grating sound of a mountain, shifting its weight. From those unmoving lips, a voice boomed, a sound like rock slides and deep earth. It spoke not in a common tongue, but in the ancient language of lineage, demanding to know the names and deeds of those who dared to walk the hall of the ancestors. Fror stepped forward, his own voice a thin but steady red against the thunder. He recited the long-dead kings and the forgotten queens, the clan alliances, and the great works of their smiths. For a time, his knowledge was a key, and the statues fell silent after each recitation, their gemstone eyes dimming. Then a new voice, deeper and colder, asked a question of purpose, not blood. Why do the children of stone disturb the sleep of the makers? Thrain, thinking of glory and reclaimed honor, gave an answer that was true to his heart. The statue before them did not dim. Its arm, a limb of solid granite, swept down to block the path, the wind of its passage buffeting them. The gemstone eyes now glowed with a hostile red light. Kara and Dwalin dropped into fighting stances, but Thrain knew their axes would be useless against this sentinel. He pushed past them, standing directly before the colossal figure. He spoke again, not of personal ambition, but of his clan's long exile, their silent forges, and their vow to one day be worthy of their name again. His voice cracked with the weight of generations. Still, the statue did not move. In a final, desperate act, he drew from his pack a simple, unadorned hammer, its handle smoothed by the grip of his father and his grandfather before him. "This is all I have of my heritage," he said, holding it up. "It has built homes and mended walls. It seeks now to rebuild a legacy." He placed the heirloom gently on the stone floor at the statue's feet. The red light in the Guardian's eyes softened, shifting to a calm, clear blue. The blocking arm retracted, lifting slowly back to its place. The voice echoed once more, its tone now less accusatory, more weary. "You carry the weight of your line with honesty. Pass, but know this, we are the memory of this place. The guardians that wait below are its will, and they are not swayed by sentiment or heirlooms." As the last word faded, a massive door at the far end of the hall, previously seamless with the wall, groaned inward. It revealed not more darkness, but a tunnel whose walls were veined with the same pulsating mithril they had seen before. The air that washed over them hummed with a palpable, waiting energy, a power that felt both ancient and utterly awake. The mithril veins pulsed with a faint, hypnotic light as the passage narrowed into a twisting throat of rock. Then the whispers began. They were not echoes, but distinct voices, soft and achingly familiar, calling from the shadows just beyond their lantern light. A mother's soothing tone, a child's laugh, a comrade's final sigh. The tunnels were not merely speaking, they were hunting, using the most intimate weapons of memory and regret. Kara heard the voice of a shield sister she had failed to save, urging her to seek vengeance in a side passage. She gritted her teeth and walked on, her knuckles white on her axe haft. But Dwalin froze. From a dark alcove to his left, a voice he had not heard in decades called his name with gentle affection. It was his older brother, lost in a mining collapse, the ghost that haunted all his engineering fears. The voice pleaded for help, saying he was trapped but alive, just a few steps away. Logic shattered. Dwalin's face, so often a mask of calculation, crumpled into desperate hope. He took a lurching step off the main path, his hand outstretched toward the voice. Kara's own grief had sharpened her senses. She saw the emptiness in the alcove, the faint shimmer of a lethal drop, just beyond the lip of the tunnel. As Dwalin leaned forward, she grabbed the back of his tunic and hauled him backward with a fierce grunt. He stumbled, falling hard on the stone floor, his eyes wide with the shock of the betrayal and the rescue. The illusion shattered, leaving only the cruel, continuing whispers. Thrain saw the terror in their faces, the way their eyes darted toward every phantom plea. This was a battle that could not be fought with axes or hammers. He quickly uncoiled their longest rope. "We tie ourselves together," he commanded, his voice a firm anchor in the psychic storm. "Not just for safety, for sanity. Focus on my voice. Focus on the person in front of you. Our only goal is the heart of this place. Nothing else is real." The whispers, thwarted, grew more vicious. They no longer offered comfort or hope. They twisted into accusations, replaying past failures and voicing deepest insecurities. You were too slow, Kara, a whisper hissed. He died because of you. You cannot calculate the weight of your own worthlessness, Dwalin, another mocked. The air grew thick with the psychic weight of their collective fear, the very stone seeming to feed on their anguish. It was a gauntlet of the mind, each step a victory of present trust over past pain. They moved as a single roped entity, their eyes locked on each other, repeating their shared purpose like a mantra. Pushing through the final, desperate wave of auditory illusion, they stumbled out of the whispering tunnel and into a vast open space. The tormenting voices ceased, replaced by a deep, rhythmic sound that filled the cavern. It was the sound of breath, a slow, resonant inhale and exhale that seemed to come from the cavern walls themselves. The air itself was alive. The slow, rhythmic breath of the cavern was not just a sound, but a physical force. The walls themselves pulsed, expanding and contracting like a vast, stony lung. Tendrils of rock, slick with a strange phosphorescence, uncurled from the stone to grope blindly through the air before retracting back into the living wall. This was not a place built by dwarves. It was a place that had grown. To move forward was to dance with the mountain's own heartbeat, timing each desperate sprint between the rhythmic contractions of the passage. One moment of hesitation would mean being crushed or snatched by the animate stone. Kara led, her eyes calculating the timing, her body a coiled spring. They moved in a frantic, stop-start rhythm, pressing themselves into alcoves that threatened to close, then darting forward as the path opened. It was during one of these frantic dashes that Fror, his mind still clouded from the whispering tunnels, misjudged the retraction of a stony tendril. It brushed against his arm, and though it felt like little more than a rough caress, a wave of piercing cold shot through his limb. He cried out, stumbling forward as his arm fell limp and numb at his side, the skin turning a pale, waxy gray. Is it venom or some deeper magic? Balin asked, his voice tight with alarm as he supported the lore keeper. We cannot know, and we cannot carry him through this. We must turn back. Dwalin, his engineer's mind finally finding a problem he could quantify, shook his head, his eyes fixed on the pulsing walls. Retreat is a different kind of death. Look at the pattern. The contractions are not random. They have a resonance, a frequency. He pointed a trembling finger at specific nodes in the rock where the pulsation seemed to originate. If we can disrupt that resonance, we might be able to stun it, create a stable path long enough to cross. His plan was audacious and terrifying. He proposed using their hammers and axes not as tools of destruction, but as instruments, striking specific resonance points in a precise sequence to create a counter vibration. It would require perfect timing and immense force, and if they failed, the resulting shockwave could bring the entire living tunnel down upon them. Thrain looked from Fror's pale face to the pulsing, predatory cave. He saw no other choice. We trust your calculations, Dwalin. We do it. They formed a line, each dwarf taking a marked position. On Dwalin's signal, they struck. The sound was not a clang, but a deep, shattering chord that vibrated up through their bones. The effect was immediate and profound. The pulsing walls seized, the tendrils freezing mid-reach. A low, pained groan echoed through the cavern as the living rock was momentarily paralyzed. Go now, Dwalin yelled, his voice strained. The path is open. They ran, half carrying Fror, their bodies aching from the effort of the resonant strike. The stillness was eerie and temporary. As they reached the far end of the cavern, a final, shuddering contraction passed through the stone behind them, a deep, resentful tremor that felt less like a natural process and more like a creature remembering an injury. They had not merely passed through, they had wounded the mountain, and it would not forget. The chaotic, breathing rock gave way to an absolute and unnerving stillness. They stood at the edge of a vast, subterranean lake, its water a perfect, unbroken black. The surface was a sheet of polished obsidian, so still it did not ripple, reflecting their own haggard faces and the faint glow of the mithril veins in the ceiling with a clarity that felt like a violation. There were no waves, no sound of water, only a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the very air from their lungs. The surface of the lake was a perfect black mirror, reflecting their exhausted faces with unnerving clarity. As they searched for a way across, faint, glowing lines appeared just beneath the water, tracing the outlines of stepping stones that were not there. The path was an illusion waiting to be made real. Fror, his good hand pressed to the numbed one, whispered a terrible truth he had read in the oldest legends. This was the lake of unspoken truths. The stones would only bear their weight if their reflections showed no hidden deceit. The first step was Kara's. She stepped forward, her warrior's pride a visible shield, and placed her boot on the first glowing outline. The stone shimmered into solidity for a moment, then wobbled violently, threatening to plunge her into the lightless water. Her reflection in the black surface did not show a confident protector, but a dwarf haunted by a secret shame. She tried to step back, but the stone would not let her retreat. The choice was confession or drowning. Her voice, when it came, was stripped of its usual strength. "I led a patrol," she admitted, her gaze fixed on her wavering reflection. "We were ambushed. I made a choice that saved most, but left one behind to cover our escape. He was my friend. I have carried the weight of that choice as cowardice ever since." As the truth left her lips, her reflection shifted. The guilt did not vanish, but it was joined by a grim acceptance. The stone beneath her foot stabilized, becoming as firm and solid as the mountain itself. The path now demanded the same brutal honesty from them all. One by one, they stepped onto the glowing outlines, each forced to voice a truth they had buried deep. Dvalin confessed that his obsession with calculations was a shield against the fear that some disasters were simply beyond prediction or control. Balin, the wise elder, admitted that his caution was often just a mask for his own terror of being responsible for another generation's ruin. The air grew thick with their shared vulnerability, a raw and painful intimacy that was more terrifying than any physical foe. Finally, it was Thrain's turn. He stood at the edge of the path they had created, a road of confessed fears and failings. He looked at his own reflection, the young prospector who had dragged them all into the dark on a dream. His voice was soft, but it carried across the silent water. "I am afraid," he said, "not of the guardians or the curses. I am afraid that my ambition is a folly. I am afraid that I will lead you all to your deaths and return to our clan with nothing but another story of loss. I am terrified of failing you." As he spoke his fear aloud, the entire path erupted in a soft, white light. Every stepping stone flared with brilliance, creating a broad, stable, and radiant bridge across the black expanse. His ultimate honesty had not just solidified his own step, It had sanctified the entire journey, transforming their individual confessions into a collective strength. On the far shore, the brilliant stones faded, leaving the lake once again a sheet of perfect, undisturbed black. The air was different, no longer heavy with judgment, but charged with a new, focused energy. A scent reached them, one they had not encountered in the deep, sterile dark. It was the smell of soot, hot metal, and ozone. They turned as one. Built into the cavern wall was a massive, circular forge. Its stone anvil was scarred from countless strikes, and its great bellows, made of some strange, leathery hide, hung still. Most unnerving of all, a faint, orange glow still pulsed within the heart of the forge's fire pit, and a wisp of heat haze shimmered above the anvil. It was not a relic. It felt as if the smith had just set down his hammer, as if the grand work had been interrupted only moments before their arrival. The forge pulsed with a heat that felt ancient and alive. Set upon the scarred anvil was a blade, or the ghost of one, its metal still white-hot along one edge, while the other remained a dull, unshaped blank. Enchanted tools lay beside it, humming with a low energy, and the coals in the pit glowed with a fire that had not dimmed in 1,000 years. Dwarven, the engineer, was drawn to the perfection of the mechanism. His fingers itched to feel the balance of the great hammer, to understand the magic in the bellows. He ignored the hissed warnings from the others. He had to know. He lifted the heavy, rune-inscribed hammer and brought it down upon the unfinished blade. The strike did not produce a clang, but a single, pure, resonant tone that hung in the air, a note of such perfect clarity it seemed to cut through the stone itself. For a moment, there was only that sound, vibrating in their bones. Then the cavern answered. The walls themselves began to crack and shift. Sections of rock broke away, not falling but unfolding, as immense stone constructs pulled themselves from the living mountain. Their forms were blocky and powerful, with gemstone eyes that blazed with the same orange light as the forge. They moved with a terrifying, grinding purpose, surrounding the dwarves, their stony fists raised to crush the intruders who had disturbed the silence. Kara and Balin stood back to back, axes ready, but they knew their weapons would be little more than splinters against these guardians. As the first construct lunged, Thrain did not raise a weapon. His eyes were fixed on the unfinished blade, which now pulsed in time with the pure tone it had emitted. He saw it not as a sword, but as a key, a focus point for the very will that had built this place. He dropped his pack and grabbed the glowing weapon blank with his bare hands. The heat was immense, but it did not burn him. It felt like purpose. He did not swing it. He held it aloft, and in that moment, he channeled everything they were. He thought of Kara's redeemed honor, Dwalin's reclaimed courage, Balin's hard-won faith, and Fror's unwavering lore. He thought of their shared confessions at the lake, their united will to restore their clan's name. The blade flared with a brilliant white light, and the constructs froze in mid-motion. Their gemstone eyes shifted from hostile orange to a calm, accepting blue. They did not attack. Instead, they bowed their great stone heads in a single, unified motion of respect. The lead construct's voice was the sound of grinding millstones. You bear the weight of truth and the fire of legacy. You are heirs to this forge. It reached into its own stony chest and withdrew a small, crystalline key that pulsed with a soft inner light. This will grant you passage to the inner vault, where the greatest work of our makers sleeps. But know this, we are but the sentinels of the gate. Deeper still waits the Watcher in the dark, a being not of stone and will, but of silence and endings. It guards the Heartstone. The construct fell still, returning to its place in the wall, once more indistinguishable from unworked stone. The Crystalline Key hummed in Thrain's hand, its vibration syncing with the slow, powerful beat they now felt thrumming up from the floor. It was the Stronghold's heart, and it was growing stronger with every step they took toward the final, waiting chamber. The Crystalline Key pulsed in Thrain's hand, its light guiding them to a seamless wall of obsidian. Before them, the Vault of Echoes revealed itself not as a door, but as a massive, circular stone, covered in runes that shifted like liquid silver. They did not form words, but notes, a musical staff carved from the mountain's heart. Fror's eyes widened with recognition. "The runes are a song," he whispered, "the very harmony we use to calm the crystal caverns. Our voices are the only key." Thrain and the Lore Keeper stood before the shifting symbols, their minds racing to recall the precise sequence of deep, resonant notes that had saved them. Thrain began, his voice a low, steady hum, finding the foundational tone. Fror joined him, his own voice weaving a complex harmony above it, a melody of stability and ancient power. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the shifting runes locked into place, glowing with a soft blue light. A deep, resonant click echoed through the chamber, and the great stone disc groaned inward, grinding against the floor to reveal the treasure within. The air that washed over them was thick with the scent of aged parchment, cold metal, and undisturbed time. The vault was not filled with gold or jewels, but with a far greater wealth. Scrolls of impossibly thin metal were stacked beside crystalline tablets that glowed with inner light. On pedestals sat artifacts of unimaginable craftsmanship, a helm that seemed woven from starlight, an anvil that hummed with potential energy. The sheer weight of lost knowledge was a physical pressure in the room. Dvalin reached instinctively for a complex astrolabe of interlocking gears, his engineer's soul crying out to understand its secrets. Kara's eyes were locked on the starlit helm, a tool for a protector of legends. The temptation to linger, to take just one piece of this forgotten glory, was a siren song more powerful than any whisper from the tunnels. A deep, percussive rumble shook the vault, and a fine dust sifted down from the ceiling. The reminder was brutal and immediate. Their time was not their own. Thrain's voice cut through the spell of greed, sharp and clear. "We take only what we came for, nothing more." His eyes scanned the chamber, passing over the wonders to find a simple dais at the room's center. Upon it rested the Heartstone. It was not a large gem, but its presence filled the space. It pulsed with a gentle, warm light, and looking at it, they felt a sudden, profound sense of vitality, as if a forgotten strength was rekindling in their own bones. This was the lifeblood of their quest, the artifact said to restore a Dwarven clan's fading spirit. Thrain stepped forward, his hand closing around the smooth, warm stone. The moment he lifted it from its resting place, the great vault door groaned, beginning its slow, inexorable grind back into place. The floor trembled violently, and from the abyssal darkness of the chasm they had crossed, a sound emerged that was the absolute opposite of the mountain's living breath. It was the sound of silence given form, a void that swallowed all echo. A colossal shape, darker than the blackest rock, began to uncoil from the depths, its form blocking the only path back to the world above. The Watcher uncoiled from the abyss, a being of absolute shadow and jagged stone. 2 points of cold white light ignited within its form, not eyes, but voids that drank the light from their lanterns. Its voice was not a sound, but a pressure in their minds, a command that shook the very foundations of the cavern. You have taken what is not yours. Return the Heartstone, or become one with the silence you have disturbed. The floor heaved, and massive chunks of rock began to shear from the ceiling, crashing down around them in a thunderous hail. Kara's axe was in her hands, her body angled for a charge. "We cannot reason with a mountain, Thrain," she shouted over the din. "Let me try to break it." Thrain gripped the warm Heartstone, feeling its vitality surge against the crushing despair the Watcher emanated. He saw the futility in her plan. Her axe would shatter on that form before it even registered a blow. This was not a foe of flesh and bone, but a manifestation of the Stronghold's will. "We do not fight it," he yelled back, his voice strained. "We must prove we are not thieves." He took a step forward, directly into the path of the falling debris, and held the glowing Heartstone high. Its warm light pushed back against the Watcher's oppressive gloom. "We seek not to plunder, but to heal," he cried out, his words aimed at the ancient consciousness within the stone form. "My people are fading, our forges are cold, and our songs are whispers. We ask for the chance to use this legacy not for wealth, but for survival." He made the offer, the only pact he could. "Let us take the Heartstone to restore our clan's spirit. I vow, on my name and the honor of all my line, that once its work is done, I will return it to this vault myself." The cavern's violent shaking lessened. The Watcher did not move, its stone face an unreadable cliff, but the psychic weight of its judgment lessened by a fraction. It was considering. The fate of their entire quest hung on the decision of this timeless sentinel. Kara stood ready, her muscles coiled, but she held her ground, trusting Thrain's gamble. The silence stretched, broken only by the groan of stressed rock. Then, the Watcher's form seemed to soften at the edges, the hard lines of shadow blurring. "Your vow is heard, child of stone," the mental voice echoed, now less hostile, more weary. "The Stronghold has slept too long. Perhaps it is time a new song was sung with its power. But know this, the way will seal behind you. These halls will return to their slumber, and you must never seek this path again. The cost of return is utter annihilation." With a final grinding shudder, the colossal being of shadow and stone withdrew, melting back into the walls of the chasm from which it came. The path ahead was clear, but the thunderous rumble of shifting rock behind them was a constant reminder. They were not just leaving a treasure behind, they were leaving a part of the mountain's soul, with a promise that now bound their future as tightly as the stone bound their past. The mountain's fury chased them like a living beast. Their frantic sprint back through the familiar passages became a nightmare of collapsing stone and choking dust. The roaring echo of the Watcher was a physical force at their backs, and with every tremor, another section of tunnel behind them vanished into rubble. Dvalin cried out as a falling rock glanced off his leg, his stride breaking into a painful limp. "We cannot stop," Kara yelled, her voice raw, but even as she said it, she was at his side, slinging his arm over her shoulder. Balin took his other side, and their flight became a desperate, lurching dance of survival. The air grew thick and heavy, each breath a lungful of powdered stone that threatened to choke them. Thrain could feel the precious seconds slipping away, the thunder of collapse gaining on them. He clutched the Heartstone, its warm pulse a stark contrast to the cold dread closing in. He made a choice, pouring his own will into the artifact, not to heal, but to protect. A sphere of soft, golden light erupted from the stone, enveloping the 5 of them in a shimmering dome. The shield hummed with energy as falling rocks shattered against its surface, buying them precious moments. But Thrain could feel the immense strain, a draining exhaustion that mirrored the stone's flickering light. They reached the great sealed gate, only to find their worst fear realized. The massive stone door was jammed, blocked from the outside by the very collapse that had trapped them at the start of their journey. The golden shield wavered, the light thinning as Thrain's strength faded. Together, Kara roared, her voice cutting through the din. They threw their combined weight against the unyielding stone, shoulders and hands pressing as one. Dwalen, despite his injury, braced his good leg and pushed, his face a mask of pain and determination. With a final, collective heave born of pure desperation, the jammed gate shuddered and burst open. They tumbled through into the familiar, cooler air of the upper mines, collapsing onto the rough stone floor as the shield of light vanished and the tunnel behind them sealed forever with a final, definitive roar. The cool, thin air of the upper mines had never tasted so sweet. They stumbled into the main hall, 5 figures caked in dust and dried blood, their clothes torn and their eyes hollow with a weariness that went deeper than bone. A stunned silence fell over the dwarves who had been tending the forges, their hammers falling still. These were not the hopeful prospectors who had left. These were revenants returned from a tomb. Then Thrain raised his hand. In his palm, the Heartstone pulsed with a gentle, golden light, and as its warmth spread through the chamber, a collective gasp rose from the crowd. It was a hope made tangible, a future they had only dared to whisper about, now glowing in their midst. The elders pushed forward, their stern faces etched with disbelief that slowly melted into awe. Thrain Stonehand, the mere prospector, was now Thrain the Pathfinder, his name spoken with a reverence that made him uncomfortable. But the triumph was a hollow echo in his chest, drowned out by the Watcher's final warning, a vow that now felt carved into his very soul. The celebration was immediate and boisterous. Some of the younger, more ambitious smiths were already clamoring to bring the stone to the forges, to channel its power into weapons and armor that would make their clan invincible. "You hold the dawn in your hand," one urged, his eyes gleaming. "Why let it sit idle?" Thrain's voice cut through the noise, calm but unyielding. "This is not a tool for conquest," he declared. "It is a seed for survival. We will not exploit its power. We will honor it." His decision was final. The Heartstone would be placed on a pedestal in the clan's central hall, a beacon of their restored legacy. But it would only be used in the most dire need, preserving its strength and respecting the ancient pact. As the feasting began and songs filled the hall, Thrain stood apart. He felt the Stronghold's magic humming in his veins, a new, instinctive understanding of the stone around him. He could feel the stress points in the ceiling, the age of the granite, the silent stories trapped within the walls. Kara found her reflexes were sharper, her perception of threat almost precognitive. Dwalen could now sense the harmony in structures, knowing how to make them stronger with a mere touch. They had been granted gifts, but they were also bound, forever tied to the secrets of the deep and the weight of the promise they carried. Thrain looked past the celebrating dwarves, past the warm glow of the hearths, toward the sealed passage that led into the mountain's heart. The thunder of its final closure still echoed in his memory. Some doors, once closed, should never be opened again, for the greatest treasures are often guardians of even greater perils. The celebration had not yet faded when the summons came. Thrain was to join the ruling council of elders, a seat his line had not held for generations. The council chamber was a circular room of dark, polished stone, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and older power. He took his place at the great stone table, the youngest dwarf there by at least a century, and felt the weight of skeptical gazes. The first order of business was the Heartstone itself. Elder Grimnir, his beard braided with iron rings, leaned forward. "The stone is a tool," he declared, his voice echoing in the chamber. "We must use it. We can forge blades that never dull and armor that cannot be pierced. We can reclaim our place through strength, not sentiment." Thrain met his gaze, the memory of the Watcher's silence a cold stone in his own heart. He spoke not with a prospector's passion, but with a pathfinder's grim certainty. The Stronghold was not a treasury to be looted, he argued. It was a library of lost arts, a sanctuary of ancient power. To exploit it for short-term gain would be to repeat the very folly that had doomed its original builders. His words sparked a firestorm of debate. Traditionalists saw only weakness in his caution, while younger members, inspired by his journey, championed his vision of preservation. The rift in the clan's leadership was now carved as deep as any chasm he had crossed. Thrain felt the frustration rise, the instinct to command with the authority his new title granted him. But he remembered the lake of unspoken truths and how honesty had built a bridge. He forced himself to listen, to find the common ground of fear for their clan's future. He proposed a compromise, a path of tempered ambition. "We will not send miners with picks into the dark," he stated. "We will send small, carefully chosen groups of scholars and guardians. Their mission will be to study the upper, safer reaches of the Stronghold, to learn from the carvings and the architecture under the strictest rule. They will take nothing but knowledge." After a long, tense silence, the council agreed. It was a victory, but a fragile one. Thrain knew the agreement was a thread that could be severed by a single act of greed or reckless curiosity. The peace they had won was as delicate as the resonance in the crystal caverns. In the weeks that followed, as the first scholarly expeditions began their cautious work, a new unease settled over the settlement. It started as a faint vibration underfoot, a tremor so slight one might mistake it for a heavy cart passing in a distant tunnel. But Thrain felt it in his bones, a familiar, rhythmic pulse that did not belong to the familiar workings of their home. The deep realms were not yet done with them. The faint, persistent tremor underfoot was a constant reminder that their hard-won peace was fragile. Kara felt it more keenly than most, her newly honed senses screaming that the mountain's silence was a lie. While others celebrated, she saw the lingering greed in certain eyes, the way some still looked toward the sealed passage with ambition, not reverence. One evening, she stood before the clan council, her axe resting on the stone table. "I will not let our victory become our downfall," she stated. her voice echoing in the chamber. I pledge to form a new order, the Stone Wardens. Our only purpose will be to guard the hidden places, to ensure no hand, dwarf or other, ever disturbs the deep slumber again. Her vow was met with a mix of admiration and deep suspicion. The traditionalists who had doubted Thrain now doubted her. A warrior turned sentinel, Grimnir grumbled. Is this a true calling, or merely a way to gather power under a new banner? Kara did not argue with words. She began to recruit, but not from her own loyal followers. She sought out dwarves from rival clans, those who had spoken most fiercely against Thrain's quest. She went to them not with promises of glory, but with a simple question. Will you help me protect our future from our past? To everyone's surprise, many agreed. They were won over by her blunt honesty and the sheer weight of the responsibility she offered. A bridge, fragile but real, began to form between the fractured factions of the clan. Proving her commitment required more than recruitment. She led the first patrols herself, walking the perimeter of the sealed areas with a vigilance that bordered on obsession. When a young, ambitious smith was caught, trying to pick the lock on a restricted archive, it was Kara who stood guard over him all night, not as a jailer, but as a mentor, speaking of the cost of knowledge and the weight of the Watcher's gaze. Her deeds slowly quieted the whispers. Her most defining decision was where to base her new order. She chose a cavern, not in the comfortable heart of the settlement, but in the cold, echoing hall just before the great sealed gate. Here, the Stone Wardens would live, their presence a permanent warning to any who looked too long into the dark. The order grew, its ranks filled with dwarves who understood that some doors are meant to stay closed. This very success, however, became its own danger. The existence of a dedicated guard only highlighted the value of what lay hidden. Whispers began to circulate in the farthest trading outposts, tales of a dwarven clan that had tamed an ancient power and now hoarded it behind a wall of chosen warriors. Greedy eyes from the outside world began to turn toward the mountain, seeing not a sanctuary, but a vault to be cracked. It was during one of her solitary patrols along the sealed gate that Kara's sharp eyes caught a glimmer. She knelt, her fingers tracing a patch of wall that had been smooth the day before. Now it bore a faint, fresh carving, so delicate it seemed etched by a needle of stone. It was not a rune of warning or a map. It was a single, perfect dwarf star, a symbol of hope and guidance, with one of its points elongated into a subtle arrow, pointing downward toward the absolute, unbreachable stone. The mountain was not just sleeping, it was watching, and it had just sent a message. The faint tremor was a warning, but the scroll Devalen unrolled was a revelation. He had spent weeks in the archives, his engineer's mind captivated not by tools or weapons, but by a single sheet of mithril foil, its surface etched with star charts that mapped not the sky, but the deep places of the world. It spoke of other strongholds, realms deeper than Khazad-dûm, each a perfect, isolated world. One was a forge fueled by the planet's own molten heart. Another was a library where knowledge was not written, but sung into crystals that held the memories of ages. A third was a garden of stone, where living rock was shaped into forms of breathtaking beauty. Each sanctuary was protected by its own unique guardian, a being as ancient and specialized as the Watcher in the dark. Devalen's hands trembled with a scholar's fervor. This was not a map to treasure, but to understanding, a chance to learn the deepest secrets of their people. He rushed to find Thrain, his mind alight with possibilities. Thrain's reaction was a cold splash of reality. He listened in silence, his eyes fixed on the shimmering scroll, but he saw not knowledge, but a precipice. The clan's fragile unity, Kara's new order, the sacred vow he had made to the Watcher, all of it would shatter if this truth became known. It would ignite a firestorm of ambition, a new gold rush into the abyss that would make their first quest look like a child's errand. "You want to show this to the scholars," Thrain said, his voice low and heavy. "They will see only the next horizon, not the chasm at their feet. This is not a discovery to celebrate. It is a burden to bear." The two friends stood divided by the same truth, one seeing a key, the other a lock that must never be opened. Their argument stretched late into the night, a quiet, tense conflict fought in whispers within the secure archive. Dwalen pleaded for the pursuit of knowledge, for the right of their people to reclaim their full legacy. Thrain countered with the crushing weight of consequence, the certain doom that came from awakening powers they could not hope to control. In the end, it was not one man convincing the other, but a shared, grim understanding. The scroll was too dangerous for their time. The clan was not ready. With a heavy heart, Dwalen agreed. They would not destroy the knowledge, for that would be a sin against their heritage. Instead, they would hide it. They placed the mithril scroll inside a cylinder of black iron, sealing it with a complex lock of Dwalen's own design, and concealed it within the deepest, most secure vault, a place meant for artifacts of dire importance. As the vault door groaned shut, Thrain placed a hand on Dwalen's shoulder. "We are not its owners," he said softly. "We are its guardians. We swear now that this truth will sleep until a generation wiser than ours is born, a generation that understands that some doors are not meant to be opened, but respected." They swore the oath there in the silent dark, a pact between a pathfinder and an engineer, binding their honor to a secret that could either save their people or lead them to utter ruin. The weight of it settled on their souls, a new kind of stone they would carry forever. That night, exhausted and burdened, Thrain dreamed. He stood once more before the abyss, and the Watcher was there, its form of shadow and jagged rock utterly still. It did not speak or move. It simply watched him, its void-like eyes holding a knowledge as deep and endless as the dark between the stars. The dream of the Watcher lingered in Thrain's mind like a cold stone, but Fror found a different way to carry the weight of their journey. In the quiet of the archives, with his injured arms still stiff, he unrolled a fresh sheet of vellum and began to write. His chronicle was not a dry list of events. It was a tapestry woven from memory and myth, blending the grinding fear of the living tunnel with the solemn judgment of the stone sentinels. He wrote of Kara's confession on the Black Lake and Dwalen's resonance in the crystal caverns, framing their failures and triumphs as lessons carved in stone. This would be a new kind of lore for their people, a guide that taught respect for the deep places, not through fear alone, but through understanding the terrible cost of greed. His ink-stained fingers worked for months, ensuring every detail was recorded, especially the Watcher's final warning. He included the entity's exact words, the psychic command that had shaken them to their core. Some knowledge, he wrote, does not empower, it obligates. It places a chain of duty upon the soul that can never be removed. When the chronicle was complete, it was immediately controversial. Elders from more militant clans demanded sections be removed. This tale will inspire every hot-headed youth with a pickaxe to go delving for glory, one argued, his face red with anger. Others, whispering in shadowed corners, accused Frore of hiding things, of using beautiful words to conceal the true locations of the Stronghold's greatest treasures. They wanted coordinates, not philosophy. Frore refused to change a single word. To censor the warning would be to betray the journey itself, he stated calmly before the council. The price of this knowledge is the burden of its protection. If we remove the cost, we invite the catastrophe. His resolve turned the chronicle into something more than a history. It became a testament. Scribes began the laborious process of copying it by hand, and as these copies traveled to distant clan halls, carried by traders and messengers, a subtle shift occurred. Dwarves who heard the story did not just dream of treasure. They spoke in hushed tones of the living rock and the sentinels of shadow. They argued about the nature of the Heartstone's power. And in the flickering torchlight of halls far from Thrain's mountain, new whispers began to circulate. They were faint, speculative, and utterly transformative. If one such stronghold existed, guarded by a being of silence and endings, what others might be sleeping in the absolute dark, waiting for a song to wake them. The blight had crept into the mountain like a slow poison, withering the hardy cave moss crops and leaving the herd beasts listless and thin. Desperation began to gnaw at the clan's spirit, a fear more insidious than any collapse. It was then that Thrain brought the Heartstone from its place of honor. He did not take it to the forges, but to the clan's central grove, a vast cavern where the life of their home was nurtured. Under the hushed gaze of the entire settlement, he placed the softly glowing stone upon a simple altar of unhewn rock. He did not chant complex spells or demand great power. Instead, he, Balin, and Frore simply rested their hands upon it, their minds focused on a single, clear image of vitality and growth. They asked the mountain for its strength. They did not command it. A wave of warm, golden light pulsed from the Heartstone, washing through the grove. It was a visible breath of life. The withered mosses straightened, their gray pallor giving way to a vibrant, healthy green. The listless herd beasts lifted their heads, a new vigor in their eyes. The very air in the cavern seemed to freshen, carrying the clean scent of rain on stone. The success was immediate and undeniable. It was a miracle of sustenance, not conquest, and it won over the hearts of even the most stubborn skeptics. Elder Grimnir, who had argued so fiercely for weapons, was seen quietly placing a fresh-cut moss frond upon the altar, a gesture of profound respect. Thrain's cautious philosophy was vindicated, yet the very power that healed also inflamed old ambitions. A vocal minority, led by a master smith named Borin, saw not a renewal of life, but a wasted opportunity. Imagine what we could forge with that energy, he argued publicly, his voice ringing through the hall. We could create armor that never breaks, blades that never dull. We could build grand new halls in a single season. Why let such power sit idle when it could make us strong? Thrain faced him not with anger, but with the grim certainty of one who had seen the abyss. He stood before the clan, the Heartstone's gentle light reflecting in his eyes. This power is a trust, he declared, his voice calm but absolute. It is the lifeblood of the mountain, given to us for healing, not for dominance. We will use it to mend, to grow, and to preserve. We will never use it for profit or for power. His decree became law. The stone's gentle, constant glow in the central hall became more than a wonder. It became a symbol of their clan's new identity, a daily reminder of the balance between ambition and responsibility, between taking and nurturing. During that first, profound ritual, as the healing light flowed through him and into the stone around them, Thrain felt something beyond the gratitude of his people. Deep in his soul, a faint, resonant echo answered from the absolute depths below. It was not a sound, but a sensation, a fleeting moment of alignment, as if a great, silent presence had nodded in solemn approval. The stone tablet was small enough to fit in Thrain's palm, yet its sudden appearance at the sealed gate felt like a seismic shift. Kara's stone wardens found it at dawn, placed perfectly in the center of the stone arch, as if it had grown there overnight. It was a single, smooth slate of dark rock, its surface covered in runes that shimmered with a faint, inner silver light. The script was ancient, a dialect so old that only Thrain, his mind still humming with the Stronghold's resonance, could parse its full meaning. He traced the grooves with his thumb, feeling a cool, patient intelligence waiting within the stone. The message was not a greeting or a threat. It was a riddle, a complex geometric puzzle woven from poetic verse, describing the alignment of celestial bodies with the mountain's own hidden veins of power. Solving it, the text implied, would grant a single, carefully limited boon, temporary access to the Stronghold's outer libraries for the purpose of scholarly study alone. The council chamber erupted into fractious debate the moment the tablet's purpose was revealed. Elder Grimnir slammed a heavy fist on the table, his voice a roar of distrust. "This is a snare," he thundered. "The Watcher toys with us, offering knowledge only to snap the trap shut once we are inside. Others, their ambitions rekindled, saw only the prize." The outer libraries, they argued, could hold schematics for lost engineering marvels or medical texts that could save countless lives. The clan was once again split, teetering between the fear of catastrophe and the lure of transcendent knowledge. The weight of the decision settled on Thrain's shoulders, heavier than any pack he had carried into the dark. He spent a long night in the archives, the tablet resting before him, its riddle a silent challenge. He knew the risks were immense. A single misstep, an arrogant assumption, could be interpreted as a breach of their pact and summon the Watcher's final judgment. Yet he also saw a profound opportunity. This was not an invasion, but an invitation, a chance to prove they were worthy of dialogue, not just punishment. The next morning, he announced his decision to the council. "We will solve the riddle," he stated, his voice calm but resolute, "but we will do so with Frore. We approach this not as miners seeking ore, but as students seeking to understand a teacher." Together, Thrain and Frore became hermits of the riddle. They spread scrolls of celestial charts next to Devalin's geological surveys, their chamber a landscape of parchment and whispered theory. Thrain's innate, felt sense of the mountain's pulse gave him the foundational melody of the puzzle, while Frore's vast knowledge of myth and astronomy provided the lyrical structure. The riddle spoke of a stone that drinks starlight and a forge that needs no flame. It was a description of the Heartstone itself, but also of a specific alignment, a moment when the mountain's internal energy would resonate with a certain constellation, visible only from a single, narrow shaft high on the peak. The solution was not a key, but a time and an intent. It required them to bring the Heartstone to the sealed gate at a precise hour and orient it correctly, not to force the door, but to ask permission. The act was one of humility, an acknowledgement that they were petitioners, not conquerors. As they finalized their interpretation, a soft, distinct tremor passed through the stone floor, a vibration that lingered in the soles of their boots. It was not a threat, but a profound and silent acknowledgement. The deep realms were listening, waiting to see if the children of stone had learned the difference between taking and receiving. The solution was a vibration, not a phrase. Thrain and Frore spent days in the archives, their world shrinking to the Riddle's elegant geometry. They cross-referenced crumbling star charts, with Frore's meticulous notes from the crystal caverns, searching for the key. It was not a word to be spoken, but a resonance to be felt, a specific harmonic pattern built on the principles of balance and memory. It was the very same foundational chord they had used to calm the shattering crystals, but refined, purified into a key. When de Valen learned of their discovery, his face paled. "You are asking the mountain to sing," he warned, his voice tight. "The last time we used that harmony, we nearly brought the ceiling down. What if this triggers a final, permanent collapse?" Thrain met his friend's fearful gaze with a calm he did not entirely feel. "We are not commanding the stone now," he explained. "We are asking it to remember. We are reminding it of the harmony we forged together." His confidence was a quiet fire, born from the deep, intuitive connection he now felt with the living rock. He led a small, chosen group back to the sealed gate. In the profound silence before the immense stone slab, Thrain closed his eyes, finding the note within himself. He began to hum, a low, steady tone that was soon joined by Frore's harmony. The sound was not loud, but it was profound, a vibration that seemed to sink into the stone itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the solid rock of the gate began to shimmer, its surface wavering like heat haze on a summer road. A section of the wall dissolved into mist, revealing a shallow alcove that had been seamlessly hidden for ages. Inside rested not gold or jewels, but a small collection of scrolls, their cases carved from pearlescent stone. With reverent hands, Thrain retrieved them. Unrolling the first, they found not schematics for powerful weapons, but stark prophecies. The text spoke of a coming age of great upheaval, a time when the world itself would be shaken. They hinted that the hidden strongholds, these isolated sanctuaries of dwarven power and knowledge, would not be able to remain neutral. Their guardians would be tested, and their purpose would be called into question. They were not just vaults of the past, but bastions for a turbulent future. The weight of this new knowledge settled upon them, heavier than any treasure. They took the scrolls and retreated. As they stepped back, the shimmering alcove sealed itself, the stone becoming solid and unyielding once more, but the silence that remained was different. It was no longer the hostile quiet of a tomb, but the respectful stillness of a shared understanding. The gate was still closed, but it no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a pact, sealed not in fear, but in a fragile, newfound partnership. The first reports came from far-ranging scouts, their faces grim beneath the dust of the trail. They spoke of mountains that shook with no natural rhythm, of unnatural silences in deep valleys, and of strange, cold lights flickering from peaks where no dwarf had delved for 1,000 years. These were not the familiar groans of a living mountain, but the violent spasms of a world being disturbed. Thrain listened, and the Heartstone in the great hall seemed to pulse in time with a dread that settled deep in his own chest. Their quest had not been an end. It had been a beginning, a single stone dropped into a still pond, and now the ripples were reaching shores they had never known existed. The other strongholds, the ones from Dvalin's hidden scroll, were not sleeping. They were stirring, and something was waking them. A council of all the clans was the only path, but the old divisions ran deep as forgotten mine shafts. Messengers were dispatched to every dwarf hold, carrying copies of Fror's chronicle and Thrain's personal plea. The responses were a storm of their own making. Some clans, their spirits forged in recent hardship, heard the truth in the words and sent back pledges of alliance. Their own lore keepers recalled similar whispers. Their own scouts had seen the same unsettling signs. But others, proud and isolated in their mountain fastnesses, returned messages of scorn and suspicion. They accused Thrain of weaving a tapestry of fear to make himself a king of a united dwarf realm. You return from the dark with a pretty stone and a frightening story, one clan lord wrote, his words etched on a slab of slate. Do not think your luck makes you our prophet. The fate of every dwarf realm now balanced on the edge of a knife. Could a people famed for their stubborn independence learn to see a single, shared enemy in the coming chaos? Could they understand that the ancient powers they had always viewed as either legend or loot were a force that demanded a united front? Thrain stood at the highest watch peak of his mountain, the wind pulling at his beard. Below, the last of his envoys vanished into the foothills, carrying his fragile hope to skeptical ears. He watched the horizon, where the sun was swallowed by a bank of clouds so dark and heavy they seemed to drink the very light from the sky. The storm was not just coming. It was already here, and its first blows were not of wind and rain, but of doubt and pride. The great hall was a storm of beards and booming voices, representatives from a dozen dwarf clans. Their armor and crests, a mosaic of ancient rivalries, had come to Thrain's mountain, drawn by the dire rumors and the undeniable pulse of the Heartstone. Old grudges, some centuries in the making, were the first thing to fill the space. A lord from the Iron Peak clan accused the Stonebeards of stealing a vein of ore 3 generations past. A fiery ambassador from the Broadbeam line challenged the very authenticity of Fror's chronicle, calling it a clever forgery to grant Thrain's clan undue influence. For 3 days, the talks teetered on the brink of collapse, a fragile ship tossed on a sea of pride and suspicion. Kara and her stone wardens moved through the throng like patient rocks in a turbulent river, their hands resting on their axe hafts, their calm presence the only thing preventing heated words from becoming flashing steel. The true turning point came not from a speech, but from a demonstration. At Thrain's signal, Dvalin stepped forward. He did not bring weapons or treasure. He brought a small, sealed chest. Opening it, he revealed artifacts recovered from their own quest, items that hummed with a palpable, ancient energy. A shard of crystal from the caverns that still held a faint, musical chime. A flake of stone from the living tunnel that twitched in his palm. He let the delegates feel the cold dread emanating from a fragment of the black stone from the Bridge of Shadows. These are not legends, Dvalin stated. his voice cutting through the murmurs. They are warnings. The power in these deep places is real, and it is stirring. If we fight amongst ourselves, we will be swept away by it. Thrain then stood before them, the Heartstone glowing softly on its pedestal behind him, casting his face in a warm, golden light. He spoke not of conquest, but of guardianship. He proposed a permanent alliance, a union of clans. Each would pledge to become the protector of any deep realm within their territory, swearing to keep it sealed and safe. More radically, they would share all knowledge of the ancient world, creating a collective library so that no clan would ever be blindsided by the dangers they faced. The accord was signed, but the parchment was stained with the ink of compromise and lingering doubt. Several powerful clans from the northern ranges refused, declaring they would handle their own mountains and their own secrets. The union was born, but it was a patchwork, full of holes and untested loyalties. Its first trial was immediate. Scouts reported a new, violent tremor source in the eastern peaks, in the territory of a clan that had just signed the accord. A joint expedition was planned, a proof of their new alliance. Thrain's team, the only dwarves with first-hand experience of the deep magic, would lead it. As they packed their gear once more, the air in the hall was thick with a familiar tension. They were not just walking into the unknown eastern dark. They were walking into the hopes and fears of a fractured people. The journey east was a lesson in fragile unity. Their team was a patchwork of surly Iron Peak warriors and skeptical Broadbeam delvers, each group watching the others with eyes sharp as flint. The air in the camp each night was thick with old grievances, and only Kara's imposing presence and Thrain's calm authority kept the peace. When they finally reached the source of the tremors, the sight stole the breath from even the most stubborn doubters. A colossal section of the mountainside had sheared away in a recent quake, exposing the upper arch of a gate carved with runes of a forgotten clan. It was not the seamless, sealed majesty of their own stronghold's entrance. This was a raw, open wound in the mountain, a mouth gaping toward the sky. Before they could approach, the very scree around the entrance began to shift and clatter. From the rubble, 4 immense figures pulled themselves together. These stone sentinels were different from the statues they had faced before, their forms blockier, their movements more deliberate, like glaciers grinding forward. They did not speak, but raised their stony fists in a clear, silent challenge. The Iron Peak warriors instinctively raised their axes, ready to meet stone with steel. Thrain shouted a command to hold, his voice cutting through the tension. He stepped forward, alone, and drew the Heartstone from its protective pouch. He did not brandish it as a weapon, but held it openly in his palm, a gesture of offering. The stone pulsed with its gentle, golden light, and the energy washed over the advancing guardians. The lead sentinel halted, its featureless head tilting. A soft, blue light kindled in the place where its eyes would be, and it took a single, grinding step to the side, clearing the path. The Alliance had passed its first, silent test. Inside, the stronghold was a maze of geothermal vents and shifting, superheated stone. The air shimmered with heat, and the floors were treacherous, capable of dropping away into pools of magma without warning. This was a realm of elemental fury, not crystalline silence. Its traps were not sonic, but thermal. A hallway would suddenly seal itself with walls of glowing rock, forcing them to find hidden pressure plates that diverted underground lava flows to open new paths. Dwalen was in his element, his mind racing to understand the geothermal plumbing, while Kara's sharp eyes spotted the almost invisible seams of moving stone. They learned quickly that brute force was useless here. Trying to smash a blocking wall only made it hotter and more impassable. Success required patience and a deep respect for the mountain's inner fire. They encountered the watcher of this place, not in a grand hall, but in the chamber of a great, subterranean geyser. It was a being of living magma and obsidian, its form constantly shifting, its voice the roar of a volcanic vent. It demanded to know why the children of stone had awakened its slumber. Thrain did not speak of quests or glory. He stood before the searing heat and explained the tremors shaking the world, the disturbances in the deep places. He offered a pact, not as a supplicant, but as an ally. "We will help you restore the balance you guard," he vowed. "Share with us the knowledge of what is causing this unrest, and we will lend our strength to seal it." The Magma Watcher considered them, its fiery gaze lingering on the Heartstone. It gave a slow, rumbling assent, and the geyser chamber stilled. This victory, however, came with a terrifying revelation. As the Watcher allowed them access to a lower level, Fror felt a deep, sympathetic vibration through the stone floor, a tremor that echoed the one they had felt in their own mountain weeks before. The strongholds were not isolated. They were connected by veins of primordial power deep within the world's crust, a vast, subterranean network. Disturbing one sent shockwaves through all the others. Their mission was no longer about protecting a single secret. It was about stabilizing an entire, hidden ecosystem. The final door opened into a circular chamber, its walls covered in a bas-relief map of the known world. But this map showed what lay beneath. Dozens of nodes, each representing a deep realm, were connected by glowing lines of silver and gold, most pulsed with a steady, calm light. But one, far to the north in the territory of a clan that had refused the alliance, glowed with a violent, ominous red. The red node pulsed on the map like an infected heart, its light a violent threat against the calm silver of the other deep realms. Fror traced the glowing line that connected it to the chamber they stood in, his face ashen. "This is not a natural disturbance," he whispered. "This is a breach. Something has forced its way into that stronghold and poisoned its core. The tremors we have felt are not the mountain groaning. They are its death throes, spreading through the veins of the world." The very network that connected the sanctuaries was now conducting a fatal illness. A corrupted stronghold did not just mean a lost treasure or a silenced guardian. It meant a cascade failure, a collapse that could unravel the ancient magic, holding all the deep realms in balance. The debate that followed was swift and brutal, echoing in the geothermal chamber. Kara argued for immediate action. "We go now," she insisted, her hand tight on her axe. "Every moment we delay, this corruption grows stronger. To wait is to let the wound fester." But Dwalen, ever the pragmatist, saw only suicide. "We are 5, he countered, his voice strained. "We do not know what force could silence a guardian. We would be walking into a storm with no shelter. We need an army." Thrain stood between them, his gaze locked on the malevolent red glow. He felt the weight of the union of clans, fragile and new, resting on this decision. To charge in blindly would be to repeat the very arrogance their entire journey had taught them to avoid. Yet to do nothing was to guarantee the end of everything they had sworn to protect. His decision, when it came, was a careful, painful balance of both instincts. "We will confront it," he declared, "but not as a reckless strike. We return to the mountain. We present this evidence to the full Union. We gather a force of their best warriors, their wisest lore keepers, and their most cunning engineers. We go not as saviors, but as the spearhead of a united people." It was the only path that offered any hope. The fate of every dwarf realm, of every deep stronghold and its slumbering power, now hinged on their ability to forge a scattered and proud people into a single weapon in time to cleanse this festering darkness. They exited the eastern stronghold, not with triumph, but with a grim new purpose. The image of that bleeding red node burned into their minds like a brand. The great hall fell into a dead silence as Thrain unrolled the glowing map. He did not shout or plead. He simply laid the truth bare before the assembled lords. The pulsing red node on the subterranean map was a disease in the world's very flesh, and its poison was spreading through the stone. The initial shock gave way to a low, angry rumble of disbelief, then a rising tide of fear. Even the most stubborn of the holdout clans, who had mocked the Union as a folly, saw the terrible evidence shining before them. There was no more room for pride or old arguments. One by one, the clan lords stood, their voices gruff with grim necessity, and pledged their warriors, their smiths, and their lore keepers to the cause. They would march not for conquest, but for survival. Forging this many-headed beast into a single army was a battle in itself. Disputes erupted over supply lines and marching order. Who would lead such a host? Whose battle plans would they follow? Tempers flared like sparks from an overstoked forge. It was Thrain's quiet authority, tempered by the undeniable credibility of his team, that finally stilled the chaos. He had not sought command, but when the council turned to him, he accepted the burden. Kara was named his second, her fierce loyalty and tactical mind making her the only choice to wield his authority on the front lines. De Valen, with his genius for structure, was given the monumental task of managing the army's movement and siege engines, while Fror was placed in charge of all gathered intelligence, his mind a library against the unknown. This was no longer a quest, it was a crusade. The army that began to gather in the valleys below their mountain was the largest seen in living memory, a sea of glinting steel and stout shields. The stakes were absolute. Failure meant more than the loss of a single stronghold. It meant the unraveling of the deep magic, the death of the guardians, and the end of the ancient heritage that was the bedrock of every dwarf's identity. Their very homes would become tombs. Soon, the rhythmic clang of 1,000 hammers became the heartbeat of the mountain, a relentless day and night chorus as forges blazed, preparing for a war not against flesh and blood, but against a creeping darkness that sought to still the heart of the world. And when the great horns sounded, the dwarves marched out, a river of grim resolve flowing north, their banners snapping in the cold mountain winds like promises of vengeance. The northern peaks were a landscape of rot. The Alliance army crested the final ridge to find the corrupted Stronghold's gates, shattered inward, as if struck by a giant's fist. A foul energy oozed from the broken stone, a palpable miasma that twisted the very air, making it difficult to breathe. The rock around the entrance was veined with pulsing, black tendrils, that seemed to throb with a sickly life of their own. Thrain ordered a scouting party forward, but they barely made it to the gate before being driven back by shambling, shadowy forms. These were the Stronghold's guardians, their noble stone shapes now warped and broken, their gemstone eyes burning with a hateful crimson light. They moved with a jerky, unnatural aggression. Their once protective presence turned to pure malice. Coordinating the assault was like trying to hold back a flood with bare hands. Thrain stood on a rocky outcrop, his commands cutting through the din of battle. He split the Alliance forces, sending Kara and the main host to hold the line at the breach. A brutal, grinding conflict of axe and shield against corrupted stone. Meanwhile, he directed Dvalin's engineers to find a secondary entrance, a task requiring a delicate touch the corrupted guardians lacked. The greatest challenge was not the fight itself, but the need to understand. This was not a war of annihilation, but of purification. They had to find a way to sever the corruption, not just smash its puppets. Thrain's decision was a quiet one, made in the heart of the chaos. He gathered his original team, their faces grim and set. "We go in," he told them. "The Heartstone is our only shield. We find the source of this sickness and cut it out." With the Alliance forces creating a desperate diversion at the main gate, Thrain led his small band through a precarious fissure Dvalin had located, a crack in the mountain's flesh that bypassed the worst of the fighting. The moment they crossed the threshold, the corruption attacked on two fronts. The physical threats were constant, with the very walls of the stronghold reaching for them with jagged, stone claws. But the psychic assaults were far worse. The whispering voices from their first journey returned, now amplified into shrieks of despair and promises of betrayal, seeking to shatter their hard-won unity by preying on their deepest fears. Kara fought not just the monsters, but the phantom cries of her fallen comrades. Dvalin struggled against visions of his intricate machines crumbling into dust. The pressure was immense, a weight that threatened to crush their spirits. Their progress was a slow, agonizing crawl, a battle fought for every inch of ground, both outside and within their own minds. The Heartstone in Thrain's grip glowed fiercely, its warm light pushing back the oppressive gloom and holding their sanity together by the thinnest of threads. They pushed deeper, following a pull of malevolent energy that grew stronger with every step, a siren call leading them to the Stronghold's diseased heart. The passage finally opened into a vast, circular chamber, and there they found it. At the center, a massive crystal that should have pulsed with pure, white energy was now a throbbing orb of darkness, its light a venomous purple-black. Chained to this corrupted core, with bonds of shadow and searing light, was the fallen guardian, its magnificent form broken and contorted, its essence being slowly drained to feed the spreading plague. The fallen guardian was a terrible sight to behold. Its form, which should have been a majestic sculpture of living light and polished granite, was now twisted and brittle. Dark chains of solidified shadow bound it to the corrupted crystal, pulsing as they siphoned its radiant energy into the orb's vile core. Every instinct screamed to rush forward and shatter its bonds, but when Kara lunged with her axe, an invisible barrier threw her back with a crack of repelled force. The corruption answered their attempt, the very floor erupting in jagged spikes and tendrils of black mist that slashed at them with a bone-deep chill. They were under constant, vicious assault, and the Guardian was fading fast. Thrain's mind raced. We cannot break the chains by force, he realized. We must convince the Stronghold itself to reject them. He planted his feet, holding the Heartstone high, and poured his will into it. He did not attack the darkness. He offered his strength to the faint, golden light, still flickering within the Guardian's chest. A beam of pure, warm radiance connected the two stones, and the Guardian's light flared in response, pushing back against the draining chains. For a moment, the dark bonds flickered, becoming less substantial. "This is the opening, Kara, now," Thrain yelled, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining the connection. As Develen and Fror shouted the counter-rhythms they had deciphered from the binding runes, Kara hefted an axe, whose blade now glowed with the same blessed light as the Heartstone. She did not strike with brute force, but with precision, her blade passing through the weakened chains as if they were smoke. Each severed link screamed, releasing a wave of purifying energy. With the final chain broken, the Guardian rose, its form swelling with reclaimed power. It unleashed a wave of cleansing light, a silent, expanding sphere of pure white energy that washed through the chamber. The pulsing black veins on the walls withered and vanished. The corrupted crystal at the room's center shattered, its dark light extinguished forever. The victory, however, was instantly threatened by its own cost. The massive surge of power had strained the cavern to its limits. The ceiling groaned, and great cracks snaked across the walls, dust and stone shards raining down. The Stronghold, purged of its sickness, was now dying from the trauma of its own healing. The Guardian, its voice now a clear, resonant chime, turned its luminous gaze upon them. "You have returned my light," it intoned, "but this place is gravely wounded. It cannot hold. The corruption you defeated here was merely a symptom. Its source is a void, a nothingness that hates all song and light, and it has taken root in the deepest and most ancient of all places. You have won a battle, children of stone, but the war for the soul of the deep places has only just begun." The Guardian's words were a cold wind in the chamber, chilling the warmth of their hard-won victory. The primordial being it named was a force of pure greed and chaos, a void that had been chained in a forgotten abyssal realm at the dawn of time. Its prison was failing, and its corrosive influence was leaking into the world, seeking to devour all order, all light, and all song. The corrupted Stronghold was not the target, merely the first symptom of a disease infecting the planet's very foundations. The only hope was a ritual of containment, an act that required the unified power of every Guardian from every deep stronghold, a harmony that had not been attempted since the world was young. Thrain looked from the faces of his companions to the luminous form of the Guardian, and he understood the true scale of their responsibility. His leadership was no longer about one clan's honor or even an alliance of dwarves. It was about mustering the entire dwarf kind for a war to defend existence itself. The risk was absolute, a total war against an enemy that could not be slain, only imprisoned anew, a conflict that would demand generations of vigilance. He did not hesitate. He stepped forward, his voice echoing in the trembling cavern, and he pledged the strength of every dwarf realm, their forges, their warriors, and their wills, to this eternal cause. As he spoke the vow, a surge of power answered him. From the depths of the earth, a chorus of light responded. Beams of silver, gold, and crystalline, blue, erupted from the distant strongholds, converging on the abyssal breach. The collective will of the ancient guardians, amplified by the sworn oath of the Dwarves, became a single, brilliant spear of purpose. It slammed into the void, and for a moment, the entire mountain seemed to ring like a colossal bell. The breach sealed, not with a crash, but with a profound, deafening silence, as if the universe itself had taken a final, deep breath. The immediate threat was gone, but the cost was now carved into their souls. The dwarves were no longer just the children of stone. They were the eternal vigil, the wardens of the deep peace, bound by a promise that would outlast kingdoms and empires. Their forges would now burn not just for craft, but for a sacred duty, and every song sung in their halls would carry the weight of that vow.